who joins or is here. Before I start going into the work, I just want to give a brief overview of how I want to structure the talk. So I would want to talk a little bit about the title first, then a little bit about the nature of the talk being a virtual talk, and then I'll talk about my work starting chronologically with the beginnings, and then going into some exhibitions and some strains, threads of thoughts which go through these exhibitions. And yes, it is a lot of work, so I will start talking, and I would like to maybe ask Eckhart to kind of stop me when we get to 1 hour, but I think the talk will, I hope to cover everything in this 1 hour. If it should run over, I can go through a bit faster. So
Markus,
first, yeah?
Sorry, completely forgot to, the way the talk is structured, Markus Vater will give a presentation for 1 hour, and then we have half an hour question and answer session. So please take notes if you have any questions, and then perhaps we can follow up. So yeah, well, you know, I'm pretty sure Markus will be happy to oblige. Thank you.
Yes, yes, very happy. So, so the title is Things That Are There Because They Are Not There, Like a Shadow or Death. I named this talk, in a sense, this kind of title has a few meanings for me and points to a few parts of my work. First of all, I am interested in things. Things that are on the periphery of our world, things that exist, but we can look at them in a different way. And this is a group of things which I find very interesting. Because they they become something because of their absence. So they're not there because they are there. There's a paradox in this. And I'm very interested in paradoxes because it points to the nature of how the world is, and it is actually a construction of us. And so this points into that direction. The second part is language. Language is a very important part of my work. And in a way, this title works like a work. It sets up a talk. And a talk with that kind of title, it seems to be a talk about nothing. And so in itself, it creates a kind of meaning. And I quite like to work with titles. Like, for example, one of my great heroes, Kippenberger, Martin Kippenberger, whose shows, I often like the titles better than the shows. So they kind of created a certain kind of expectation and a space. And within this space, all the work started to look different. So they create context, which is a very powerful tool, or not tool, a powerful effect. It's also, language became important when I started to obviously move to another country. I moved to England. This is a work from around this time, quite early. It says, in einer anderen Sprache bin ich ein anderer Mensch. So it says, in a different language, I'm a different person. So language and how we speak affects who we are, and the other way around, it changes. So language is a very, very important part of who we are and how we come across. So for example, in German, back in the time, I was a much more funny person. My language was more relaxed, more joyful. In English, as you probably now notice, it's more rigid. I'm a more rigid person. And so there is different kind of vibes and phenomena which come across in language and which change back into the identity. So language is very important, but also the things that are described in the title. So things that are there because they are not there, which like death or shadow. And the title comes from a piece which I show a bit later, which is a conceptual piece. So it's a work of where I think about possible exhibitions, things that could be made. And I always wanted to do an exhibition about these things, like make a collection of these objects or these things that have this quality. And so I'm always on the lookout for finding more. So at the moment, this shadow or it's death. It's also holds. Holds have this kind of quality that they're there because they're not there. One other thing is the cold. Just recently, I just walked out of the door and I just felt quite cold. And I noticed that in a way, the cold has exactly this quality as well, being basically the absence of warmth. So what it kind of conveys is really that things are not isolated. A bit like Eckhart said in the beginning that things are connected. And so one can't be thought without the other. It's a connection between things. And I'm really, it's a relation. And most of my work is about these kind of relations, how things relate to each other. So this is a work, it's called The Snowman. It's a painting I made quite a number of years ago, and it conveys in a way, because that's why I thought I show it up, all these different kind of aspects rolled into one, where it's death, it's holds, it's the cold. And so these kind of phenomena, they keep coming up in my work. And for example, here in this work. So this is a few words about the title of the talk. In a way, it also speaks about, or the title is pointing to a certain place. It's where my work goes, which is, as I mentioned before, I'm concerned with the periphery. I'm concerned with the limits of work. So how far can art go? What can we do with art? And so to make work with the invisible is a strange kind of concept for being a visual artist, or to work, but it's always been very kind of a driver for me to kind of go where it's impossible to go. So the invisible or the not existing as a basis is an extreme situation. But this goes into a different direction, and I will show this a bit later. So the thread is, with the thread, not the threat, the thread which goes to the work is often testing the outer borders of not just the work and art, but also the world. Where does it stop? Where does it begin? And how do we construct it? What is it? And we use language often. Language plays a massive part in the construction of our reality. And so this is why language comes always back into my work as well. So this is a drawing which was part of the introduction, I guess, of the talk, and it had actually a saying underneath, which was missing there, but which says his head was so large that everything was inside it, himself included. So what I find, what this work really is, it's not what you see, but what you imagine. So a work is like a trigger, like a beginning of an image. So the image is not, for me, what's there, but what we create. And this kind of precarity of work, this, where it's actually starting to appear in a process of thinking and watching and experiencing, is the kind of territory I like to place my work in. So now I just want to talk very briefly about the nature of this talk, which is a virtual talk. It's not a talk where I'm present. And this has a lot of problems, I find, but a lot of possibilities too. So this is a performance I made just last month. It was inspired by an artist called Dennis Oppenheim, a very interesting artist from the 60s. And I invited the audience to draw an animal of their choice on my back, and I draw what I feel. And I would also encourage, if someone else wants to draw an animal on the back of the person who draws an animal on my back, that would be even better. And if a person who wants to draw an animal on my back, on the back of the person who draws on my back, on the person who draws on the back of that person, that would be even better. So I wanted to create this chain of touch and drawing. So when I introduced the, I just want to read a short kind of text I read when I introduced the performance, because I think it makes sense in the nature, about the nature of this talk being a virtual talk. So this is a text called, it's the first paragraph, and it's called The Map. I like to make maps. Some people say images are maps. I also like images, but in this case, I mean maps. I have a special map in mind, a map of touch. On it, I mark down all the touch zones that surround me, all the places I touch with my hand, all the places I touch with my feet, all the places I touch with my hair, and also how I touch them, flightingly or firmly. Some places I only ever touch with my eyes, like the stars or certain people or dangerous animals. The way we touch things, with what part of our body and how we touch them, creates the meaning they have for us. So this is a first paragraph of this text. And it just kind of illustrates, I think, the difference of how things, what the limits are. And I think that there is an existential quality to touch, which is very hard to kind of convey just through images and sound. Sound is a way of touch as well, I guess, because things are moving through the air. But it has its limitations. And I think the more touch there is, the more existential an experience becomes. So we have, as human beings, the amazing ability to feel an image, to have an experience when we see something like a film, or to mirror within ourselves the same kind of reaction as if we would be in the situation. So this is something we as visual artists really work with. This is that there is this ability of highly empathetic perception. So I hope this talk will bring across a little bit of that, and that the possibilities it has will fulfill themselves. So now this has kind of been a bit preliminary. So I just want to go now into the work and talk first of all about my beginnings. So I started studying, or I started making work at the beginning of the 90s, and I started studying in Düsseldorf. And this is the group of people which I was studying with, some of them. So I started in Düsseldorf, first at a painting class called, the painter was called Dieter Krieg. And in this class, I found a lot of like-minded students, and we started to make exhibitions together. Very early onwards, we kind of started making work outside of the art college, and would start to do it in studios or in places we found. This is the group of people. This is a few years. This group still exists. So if you're interested, they're called Hobby Pop Museum now. They still make work. I'm not part of it anymore. I was part of it for almost 10 years, but then our path we separated, or I started doing other things more, and they were in Germany, I was in England, so it stopped. But this is the group of people. This was a photo taken by Thomas Ruff. He is a famous German, or interesting German photographer, and he made a portrait of this group. I think this photo is from 1999, and it shows the artists. Some of them are architects, artists, painters, musicians. So it was a very kind of mixed group, and it kept changing. So this is an image of one of the first exhibitions we did, a very early exhibition. We were all, back then, the group was a bit smaller, and we were just painters. And we started looking for spaces where we could make exhibitions. And this was Tatiana Doll, a painter. She found this very abandoned, I think it wasn't a shipyard because there were no ships, but a massive factory building. And we just went in there and started ordering lots of material. It's kind of fairly cheap material, just 2x2 wood and some fabrics. And we would make paintings there to hang up in this hall. The show was called Drive In, because the idea was that people would come in their car and drive from painting to painting around, because instead of walking around, because it was so big. So the paintings were like 6x4 meters, and each of us did 2-3 paintings in that size. I don't, unfortunately, because it's been such a long time ago, I don't have so many images. So this is an image of a work I made, which is called Dutroux. This was a child murderer at the time who was imprisoned in Belgium. And I felt this space needed something quite brutal, quite hardcore. And so this painting came about. So all the work kind of is not preconceived, but it starts developing in the space, which normally we went into spaces for like 1 week, 2 weeks, depended, and developed the work there. This is called Hobby Pop Terror. So this was an exhibition we were invited to do at the Kunsthalle in Düsseldorf. And the interesting thing for you as students, I guess, as well, is that it kind of is a bit of a interesting strategy. We coming together and doing things together and starting to do your own stuff and calling yourself something. And we called ourselves then Hobby Pop Museum, brings you into places like museums. They seem to kind of listen to it. And once you call yourself it, they start to become interested, which is a strange thing. It became almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so we started at the beginning finding our own places, but then after it started moving, we were invited. Another thing which was great, if you have lots of people in a group, lots of people come. So it kind of multiplies. So you create a much more energy and drive with being in a group. So this was there was an opening event. This is the opening event, but and it was kind of a very wild party, which is nice. Later on, we started working from a space. So instead of just going to places, we had a permanent kind of space in a former post office, or actually the sorting hall of the post office in Düsseldorf. And over a period of probably 3 years, almost every weekend there was a different exhibition. And we invited people, or it was a platform so people could come and make work. This one, and so lots of people got quite interested. So this one was where Andreas Gursky wanted to do a bit of painting. And so he came around. Andreas Gursky, if you don't know, he's a photographer, does a very interesting large-scale work. And he and his former wife, Nina Pohl, she's there on the stepladder, they made one evening. So it was a good platform to bring people together, to exchange ideas, to test things out. So this is in the Malkasten, and also in Düsseldorf, where it was a performance where we were. This was like a theater stage, and we as a work we created the stage, and we sat down for a whole day and discussed future projects, and people could come and watch us discussing our future projects. So it was an image really of this. One or two things I just wanted to say about also the positive things of working in a group was that you allow yourself to make things you would feel almost embarrassed to if you wouldn't be in the group. You would do things you would not do normally. You'd test things. You would also sometimes execute ideas of others. And while you do that, you would take a lot away. You would make an experience which you wouldn't not normally have if you were by yourself in the studio. Often the work itself, I must admit, wasn't the greatest works of art which came out of this collaboration. Some of it was really bad painting. Some of it was kind of superficial. Some of it was fickle. It wasn't perfect, but it created a lot of possibilities, energy, and fun. So, and fun is important if you want to start and continue what you're doing. I worked with Hobby Pop until 2003, and then I started making more and more my own work. I did all the way through. Everyone had a practice as well, some more, some less. So I always had exhibitions, and I went to London. So I was working through this period quite a lot as well. But in 2003 I stopped, and I started doing a bit more my own work. So I just want to go into this a little bit and start with a work which is from 2006 or 7. I'm not 100% sure. So my practice is based around a lot of different mediums like painting, photography, drawing, animation, and I kind of keep it very open and wait where the idea carries me, which medium I work with. So I often it starts with drawing, because that's where ideas come about, and then they spread off into different directions. So this work was called Soul Sculptures, or actually it was called On Demand. I was invited by like an off space, like an art space in London called Center of Attention, run by Pierre and Gary, a couple. And they made this show called On Demand, where they, instead of having a space where people would show work, artists would show work, the visitors could ask the art to being brought to them. So you would ring up the gallerist and say, oh, I want this work by Orit Ashery, and they would bring it to their house. And you would look at it and experience it on your own walls. So this was the concept of the exhibition, and I didn't really feel I wanted to make a work at the which was carried around, but I thought it would be a great idea to use this to make work at the place, at the person who invites me, to make work there. So I thought the work I want to make was, I want to make a sculpture of the soul of the person who invites me. So I would take a plastic bag with materials, and I would meet the person, and we have a cup of tea and talk. And then I would try to look around the space, the flat or wherever it was. And I would think about what I could create to convey some of the person and some things around the idea of what a soul might be. So this was a bit, this first image here, this is soul sculpture Markus, it's my own, was more or less a poster to kind of introduce the idea to people who wanted to participate. So they get an idea, what could it be? So obviously, again, it's a little bit following my thread, it's an impossible project. It's at the edge of what's possible of making something like a sculpture out of a soul. What does that even mean? But I found that quite challenging and interesting, and it was an investigation really into this. So they were called soul sculptures. So people started to invite me, and some of it was more interesting, some of it not so interesting. This was, actually I was invited to a birthday party, and they invited me a little bit like I would be the magician to the party. And I made often like 2 or 3 different kind of works. And so this is, you can see a plinth here. The gallerist would always come with me, and he would carry a plinth. And the plinth, because it's a sculpture, so the plinth is in some of the work. And so I thought it would be nice to make a sculpture of the soul of the person, which her name was Rachel, I think. And I thought, why don't 2 of her best friends stand on the plinth and they embrace each other and think of her. And so this is the sculpture of her soul in a way. So there were different ideas which were going around. This was a different one. I'm not sure whose name, soul sculpture, I think Marie. And so I found in the house, I found photographs of her mother. They were quite old, and I thought, and we talked a little bit also about her family, and so I kind of created this idea. I took the photograph in my mouth and took a photo of it. So in a way, what really was the soul sculpture in the end, which turned out to be the sculpture, was the photograph of the event, or the how it was structured. That's what was left. So it was kind of based more and more around the photograph to create these kind of images of sculptural or performative activity. Yes. Because this became part of it, I started to thinking about it as well. So I kind of created this image as soul sculpture Claire. This is her son standing there. So I created images, or I kind of thought a possibility would also be to create an image afterwards of what happened there, and to kind of make it stronger or more visible. And so it's her arm left on his shoulder. So this is obviously this is an impossible project, but also an investigation really what the soul might be. And I'm not so sure if the soul exists as a physical entity or as a, I'm not a religious person, but I do know that there is definitely ideas and visions and effects the soul and the name and the word and the images have. And I'm interested in this, and I was kind of investigating this. So this is just trying to put some light on top of the plinth, how that could, because the soul has this part where it is associated with light. So now I'm going to go briefly through these. This is a work called Smoke Without Fire. And I quite like to have them at the beginning of my talk as well, or more towards the beginning, because they are, it's a super conceptual piece. Basically, it describes exhibitions, which I would like to do. And now I have done some of these exhibitions. Back when I made the work, I hadn't. So I'm just going to go through them and read them, because they convey quite a few ideas around my work. And this is also purely text-based again. No worries, I will show a lot of images about work which is installed a bit later. So this was called Smoke Without Fire. It was for made with a friend of mine. So it's a proposals for shows. So this is actually where the title came from for this talk. A show about things that are there because they're not there, like a shadow or death. This would be a great show to do. A show which attempts to dissolve the visitor's ego with drugs, massages, and religion. A show of good intentions, but rubbish results. A show which looks like an art show, but really is a place where people meet other people they go home with afterwards and have sex with, or just dream of it. A show which explains convincingly why some people are happy and others not. A show with the personal telephone numbers of all the people who run this planet. A show about invisible things, like love and chemical weapons and God and souls, electricity, fame. A show where we show all the money in the world. The show will be called The Evil Bird Laughs. So like a massive heap. That would be great. A show of the prettiest shadows. A show introducing the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th dimension. A show of dream objects, like a watch not on your wrist, but underneath your skin at your wrist. A show displaying the 5 oldest people on Earth. You can ask them questions. The show is over when they are dead or when you are dead. A show that animals would appreciate. So this last one, I want to kind of go and show a few kind of works which deal with this, because I recently made an exhibition, or was part of an exhibition where I made work which suit this. And animals always have been playing a role in my work, and that has to do with also with this thread that they are in a way right in the center of who we are, but somehow at the periphery, pushed to the periphery by culture or cultural self-understanding. And so animals, because we are mammals after all, and it becomes more and more clear that the kind of shift towards between animals and us is much grayer than we think. It's a much more flowing kind of connections. And we constructed this world where there's a big separation, but it's not. And that's an interesting phenomenon, I find. So I made this work. It was for a show in Leipzig, and I was invited. It was called Buchstäblich, which means literal. And I was invited. The curator said that we have this location, which is the Leipzig Zoo, which is the Institute for Primate Research. And so he asked me, the apes would get, he asked me, I could make some work for the ape enclosure, really. This was the idea. So I thought it'd be great to do some drawings and make some drawings for them. The apes get, every day they get paper given, which they rip up and they play with and they hide underneath. So it was kind of the idea to print something on a paper, but I didn't really like that. So I thought, okay, I make some drawings and text, which would be given to the apes. And so the problem was a little bit that, first of all, find a paper which is not poisonous, and also the ink. So I made this ink, which is made, it's beetroot. I cooked some beetroots and put some honey in it and created this beetroot ink, which was edible, really. It tastes quite nice. You can drink it as well. So this piece, there you see 2 pieces called Ich träume, I dream. So there's some other images. I'm just going to explain a little. This is 2 orangutans, and the word is called Zeit, which means time. So the drawings, the question I had was, what kind of drawings do I make for the ape enclosure? And I obviously thought it would be good to do something which has something to do, which works in the enclosure with the apes. At the same time, I wasn't sure. Obviously the apes will probably not read what I'm doing, but they will be affected by it in different ways. But it's also the image, and I think the hand is an interesting connection we have, and it's also the beginning of being, I guess, developing into something else from the apes. So I made some hands, but also I made words, like this is the word habe, but it's crossed out, which means to have. And I made drawings of people who are really frightened. And I made formulas about concepts like boredom. And I was thinking what boredom might be. So it's a formula. It could be fear divided by, I'm not sure how you say that in English, but it's a sinus of 1 divided by time times memory. And they are formulas which connect notions, and there is something in this, and they are serious. They're not just fun. But I don't want to go into it too deep because it'll take a bit of time. This is called happiness equals eating times doesn't matter times love divided by fear, with love never being equal to fear. So there's another image. What actually happened though in the end, I have to say this because we are on a virtual talk. Everything was ready, and at the last minute, the zoo director pulled the project. So all the images you saw, I kind of made constructed. So I would have loved it to be like this. In the end, it didn't turn out to be like this, unfortunately. So I constructed these images. They were kind of a proposal. What happened was, there's another image. But I did show, there you see, there was also, in the zoo, there's always these screens, info screens, and I showed a video on this screen, which I show you now, which was kind of meant together with the ape enclosure and the drawings. And the video was called Proposals for an Alternative Culture. I just let it run. It's very, very brief. It's not long. So this was a very short excerpt. It's actually quite long. It was a kind of a recording of a performance I made where I was standing in a natural reserve, not far from actually a path where people was walking by as well. And I would make animal noises of domesticated animals. So I think it's 20 minutes long in original. Yeah, so this was screened parallel to the drawings in the ape enclosure. Oh, it was kind of meant to be. So yes. So animals have always played a big part in my work, and thinking about what animals are and the concept. So when I was a child, animals seemed like humans. Now humans seem like animals. It's this connection I kind of investigate in quite a few works. This interest led to a group of paintings I made, and they were paintings for animals. So this is a painting I made. It's 2 by 3 meters. It's quite a large painting. It's called Painting for an Elk. So I was kind of thinking, what kind of work would an elk like? What painting? And I created this image, thinking about, you know, when you have the elk, it has its 2 eyes on the side, and I thought, what would turn an elk on? What colors? What it's kind of high contrast, and it has colors of the forest and the sky. So it was a sincere attempt. At the same time, it's kind of minimal abstract work, maybe reminding you of Hilma af Klint or now, but this work is much older. It's from 2004, I think, or 5, I'm not sure. So this was a painting for an elk. It's also thinking about abstract art, really, and reflecting where does it come from and how is it connected. So this is a painting called Painting for a Cat. Very different to the painting for an elk, because I had a cat actually there giving me straight feedback of what the cat would like. So I kind of tested a few things, and this is a bit of like an action painting, really. So she was watching me while I was doing the painting, and the movements she was interested in weren't circular movements, but it was movements of being in a place and then moving very quickly to a different place, waiting, and moving very quickly to a different place and waiting, and moving quickly to a different place. And so this structure kind of started to appear, in a way reflecting a Jackson Pollock kind of attitude, and has a bit of a result like this. Also, it's not dripped. This is a work called Painting for a Bee. So it was meant for a bee, and I did leave it in the garden for a while, and it was attracting not too many bees, I must admit. So in a way, these paintings are obviously paintings for animals. At the same time, they're paintings for people who think they are paintings for animals. So they have these different kind of layers, because they're going to be in an exhibition, and so they stay out there. This is a letter I wrote, and it was for a letter to the butterflies. And the letter I showed in an exhibition which was called Letter to the Butterflies. It's a very, very slight touch, as you can see. The text is not a text, it's like a touch and not touch, and touch and not touch. It was an exhibition I had in Düsseldorf at the Gallery Siessen-Höke, and I just wanted to show you like an example of how a show would look like. So this is the exhibition where I show often paintings and drawings and animation together. I kind of now tend to kind of separate it out a little bit more, but in a way, because they are connected, I quite like to have them together so often. So here you can see in the window there is a projection of an animation, and there is a painting called the Large Owl, which is 4 meters by 3 meters, so it's quite a large owl. And I was interested in the owl because it's a being which lives in the dark, and painting is something which exists in the light. So there's this kind of contradictive kind of nature the owl has. The animation was called The Cave Has Been Moved, after Plato's cave. And it was conceived actually not for this exhibition, but it was conceived for a different exhibition in the public space. It was projected for a whole month on a wall in a small town, or medium-sized town in Holland, in Tilburg. They have a sculpture event there, and they asked me to do a public work. And I wanted to make this work I thought it would be great. There was this bike path to make create a shadow of bikes passing by. And so people would cycle along the bike path, and then they would look left and then see a shadow of a bicyclist cycling by, which is not in tune with their own cycling. In the end, this kind of minimal idea of just duplicating a shadow turned into a much more narrative kind of piece. It just often happened that things just run away with me, and I let it happen. And so I show you a short excerpt of this animation. So, but it's always, think about it being on the side of a bike path. So I stop now. So so the work, this is, I think it's 6 minutes long. So it kind of morphs from one situation into the next, and it became quite almost like a Carmina Burana of animations, where things were moving and morphing. And it was interesting because as a film, you can't, when you have a projection that stays, I didn't want any cuts in it. So the transformations are kind of different. And the imagery which comes in this, which appears in this animation, appears then also in paintings or in drawings. It kind of moves from one to the next. Sorry, I'm just, yeah. So just because I showed this image of how it was projected, I just wanted to show a few images of work where I projected work, or work which is wall-based. Just to take this is more like a formal, not so much of a thematical approach. So this is the work I showed in a museum in Solingen, which was a projection of drawings. And it was very simple, just a text in the center of the wall, and the text was saying, most revolutionary ideas have been developed in soft armchairs. This shows upholsterers in a totally different light. So there were kind of short thoughts, or they were called interviews. So people there was a face and there was a saying. And this would move slowly from one to the next, which was a very nice way of showing drawings. And it worked quite well in this space. So I showed quite a few animations, and I also showed them on location. And this is a location, this is an exhibition which was in Museum Kunstpalast in Düsseldorf, where I was able to get, I think, 6 different projectors, and they were all connected. And they created this one massive image which was surrounding you when you walked in. So you were surrounded by animation which was moving, which was a really great thing to do. As being a painter, it was almost feeling like you walk into a painting and you're surrounded by it, and you're carried away by it. it was a great opportunity. It was called the Metaphor Problem, the exhibition, and it had different kind of short animations which were separated through some curtains which go open and close, animated curtains. But I just wanted to show very briefly how it looked. And this is a short animation I show as well, which is called Nothing. Yes. So this was an animation which was run, and then this is another one where someone is cleaning a forest. Another, just to kind of show you a little bit how work would kind of situate itself. This is a wall painting I did in Stuttgart at the Kunstverein there, in an exhibition called Firewall, and it was about surveillance actually through our new connectivity, and it had different. But I wanted to make something very non-technical, so I made some wall paintings and a text. So this is a person lying in a Silicon Valley. And there was this text on the wall, which was, which said, "Tonight I tried to hack into the computer of the Chinese Foreign Ministry and replace the word revolution everywhere with the word chocolate." So it was an idea of an action of hacking, really. So going back to the exhibition, this was just trying to show because the medium kind of changes. I just wanted to show a few examples of what and how I work on walls and with projections. But this was back at this show in Düsseldorf. This is another view of the show, the other side, and I showed a few paintings, and they're always quite different, the paintings, and they're talking about different things. Here it's a painting called The Stranger, and this one is about perception. I always think also, I often think about how we perceive and the structure of the activity we're doing. And so this work was really, the interest was, you can look at it, but it's really hard to look at it because you can't fix towards the eyes and it looks back at you. So there is a certain activation which makes it difficult, or which starts to kind of shift the perception of this. This work was called Good Morning, Mr. Rothko, which is based on a very small observation, really, which is that if you turn a rainbow into its negative, the colors which appear are very much the colors which Mark Rothko works with. The colors red and dark blues and I found this a very interesting observation, that he works almost with the negative of the light. And it's interesting that he, as a painter, I'm always interested in other painters and in the phenomena of painting and the appearance. And so this was one painting reflecting this a little bit. This was another painting in the exhibition, which was called also Die Fremde, the stranger. A woman looking at her arm, which had turned into something else. And downstairs was an image again. This is all referring often to animals again. This was called the Time Machine, like a young man riding on a cricket. And I like the idea of how time and space is connected, and how any second a cricket can jump somewhere else and be somewhere else. So, and you catapulted there, and this kind of strange connection. At the same time, there's another painting called also The Time Traveler, and it's taken from a still from a film called The Time Machine. And what really is at the basis of this is that I think a human, or we are really a time machine itself, because we carry the whole of evolution within us. Everything is kind of present so we are connected, we are related to rice, really. And so this kind of history, which is based within us, I find very interesting, and the animal being part of it. And it never goes away, everything stays. So in Mannheim, I did an exhibition at the gallery, and my attempt was to kind of show the whole history of evolution in this exhibition, from the beginning to the end, which was again a very difficult task. It had, I think the gallery had 6 rooms or 5 rooms. So each room had a different kind of theme or idea. So the first one, when you entered, was it was light. So obviously everything begins or is energy, and this was a drawing of a light drawing I made, which is basically I spent the evening to look up at the stars, and I made some holes in the paper, in a piece of paper, and then projected it onto the wall in the gallery. So it's a star sky, really. I call it a light drawing. And it has a certain kind of kitschy magic to it. It's minimal, but it's kitschy at the same time, which I quite like. It's kind of fragile, but it's kind of beautiful as well, and it's very simple. In the same room, there was a drawing called hanging there, and it says, das Messer ist eine Grenze zum Nichts. Je schärfer es ist, desto näher ist es dem Nichts. So the knife is a border to nothing. The sharper it is, the closer it is to nothing. So it's kind of the beginning, where it's about what there is nothing and there is light. The next room was about water. So I built a vase. It's kind of a handmade vase, quite high. So it contains as much water as a small person has, and it had an ear. I don't know. It's a representation of a person in a way. And in this room there was also a painting, and 2 paintings. You can see at the back there. The painting is called The Interview, and it was called The Interview. It's an attempted, and it's actually a documentation of a performance, really, which was an interview with the Atlantic I made. So I sat down and listened and recorded this interview. I didn't record it, actually. I wrote it down. So a person sitting there, this is the painting, making an interview with the Atlantic Ocean. And there was a small painting in the room saying it was hard to say if the wave was crying, as water is everywhere, I guess. And this is a transcript of the interview I made. So you have, goes like, so you can, it takes a bit of effort to read it. And it was listening to the sounds really, what the ocean made. This is another view. And in this room also there was a painting of a forest, just a glance into a forest, where I felt it had a strange kind of non-connected life force which was in this work, which I like to be in there. It's kind of primal. It's just light, plants, and that's it. The next room was animals. And I kind of like to have animals which looked at you. So there were quite a number of animals which I surrounded you when you entered the room. Not all of them looked at you, but quite a lot of them. What was interesting at the opening, you could see how people gravitated towards certain animals. And most of the time the people looked a bit like the animal. So there was a woman who, she bought the snake painting, and she really did look like the snake. She was even wearing a leather jacket, which was kind of close to it. So there's this strange kind of how we see ourselves in animals, and how animals, so this room wanted to activate this kind of connection, really. So there was a painting called The Black Rabbit. This is just a monkey. The owl. The fox. And a running horse. So the next, in the next room, it kind of dealt with human beings. So we had light, water, animals, plants, and then human beings. And there were 2 sculptures in this. I don't make many sculptures, but there were 2, and they were called To Understand and To Grasp. So the foot was to understand, and the hand was to grasp. And really, it is my interest between how language is connected with the body. And I think that how we find our words is a very weird thing, that we have these things called words, and how do they come about? And I think they are very, very directly connected to experience and to the body. And it is interesting in almost all languages that to understand has something to do with standing, and to grasp, so has something to do with taking something in your hand and holding it. So there is this strong connection, and I wanted to have this in this room as some sculptures. There was also a painting of a young man as a robin. And another painting of a house, which is like a home. I go through it quite quickly because there is some more to look, and I'm looking at the time, and I know we are already running slightly over.
So Markus, just a reminder that we want to have the chance to kind of open it up to the floor. So I do not want you to rush, but just a reminder that we need to kind of wrap up. I
will go into one more show, and then I'll finish this. So there is a small. There was also a drawing in there, saying the chameleon was looking at itself in the puddle. It tried to take on its own color and got lost internally in the process. So you have this kind of loop where the chameleon tries to take on the color it sees in the puddle, and this is its own color, and you create this kind of gray loop. And I think that's a very human thing to do, to get lost in these loops. So the last room was basically when everything was gone. It was a big painting with only a chair being left, and only water, light, and stones. So as you see, there was this kind of different stages of how the history has moved. And also in this room was a video, and maybe we can stop with this video, which was called Mary Sees the Sun. And it shows, I just let it run, and it's basically a video where I look at a sunset.
Well,
so this was sorry, just two words. This was a video. It's a little bit older, as you could see, and I looked at a sunset. I was interested in this as a painter because sunsets have this kind of romantic aspect, and but it was very clear that watching a sunset, really watching it all the way through, is extremely painful while looking at the sun. And it also showed me how limited and small our kind of areas where we are, where we exist. By just looking a little bit up into the sky for a little bit too long, we realized that how fragile and small the areas we are moving in. So again, it is talking about the thread going through the work. It's about the limits of the world and how quickly we get there, and to testing them out. So this was this is the work called Mary Sees the Sun. So I think, as Eckhart said, I was hoping there's more work to be shown, but I kind of stop here. Yes, and I'm very happy to, I hope it gave a little bit of an introduction in what I'm doing. It showed a bit older work, newer work, I hope it has, and I'm very happy to answer some questions.
Well, thank you very much. You would probably usually in a CCL talk, you would be showered with raving applause. So I don't know. We will have to kind of find a way to actually manage that in the future. But thank you very much. And I have to say that Markus had the daunting task of speaking into the laptop computer or the computer for over an hour without any reply. And that is really, really difficult. So it might be an experience for Markus to kind of deal with and use as a material in the future. I'm pretty sure it has been an interesting experience for you, and you will probably take something from it. What I want to pick up on is, and I think I want to open that to the floor, to the virtual floor there is. What I found interesting, and particularly in hindsight of looking at our students and the honors project students in particular, is strategies to bring the practice from the studio practice as a student, and those first steps into becoming a practicing artist. And I think what you did back in the day with Hobby Pop was a very successful way to join forces. And I think the situation we have right now and the situation we will be facing here in Hong Kong, I think will also perhaps provide ample opportunities for young artists to perhaps merge into these empty spaces, which we will increasingly have. Perhaps that's a strategy we might adopt also for our students, which we might organize from AVA. And I want to leave it there, and I will want to open it to the floor to questions to Markus. So please, I think you can just start to speak, and the microphone should then, or you raise your virtual hand. Whoever wants to go, please go ahead. Is there anybody with questions?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Who's asking? Oh, that's Antonia, yes?
Yeah, you mentioned that the language shape identity of a person and the personality might change from language to language. How would you choose the language of the text in your artwork?
How I choose the language? I choose it normally how it comes to me. So language is very image based. So some images don't exist in some languages. So you have it with it's raining cats and dogs that only exists in English. So I often use the one which where it comes to me, in which language it basically occurs. But there is some of them are translatable. So I often translate things that are translatable, and I kind of when I go to another country, and like I go to Germany, I choose to translate it from time to time. But some things you can't translate. Yes, so it comes to me in the language, and I keep it normally in the language it comes to me.
Yeah, interesting.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
I want to ask, what do you think when you choose to use the language of butterfly? Because you have a letter to butterfly, and then how do you think the way of presenting?
I was just thinking, you mean like how I presented this work?
Why do you choose this method to present?
I kind of, it was because, I work, because I'm interested in how we connect to animals, and I have this to observe a butterfly. So I thought that it is connected to the letter. A letter is a bit like a butterfly. It has got this lightness, and I showed it on the wall where it was unfolded, so it's kind of slightly off the wall, so it can be moved by wind. So the text I wrote was just repeating a little bit the slightest of touches, and so it tried to convey and repeat what a letter to the butterflies might look like. Although probably the butterflies won't be able to read it, but I hope maybe. Does that answer your question, or do I go wrong there? Did I go wrong there?
No, you didn't. Thank you. Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Please go ahead with other questions. You just probably just talk into your microphone or talk into your laptop. Any other questions, please? Come on, don't be shy. This is a unique opportunity.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Hello,
sure.
My name is Xian, and I'm really happy to learn more about your work. I think it's really important to you tell the story, and then you showed us kind of the other spectrum of the work. And I have a question, like those work, they are visually showing, but what if without the audience? What if you don't tell the story? How do you expect the audience to understand what you're actually doing it? Like for example, some of the work and the birds or the robin or the owl you draw, for example, they will just think you're just simply drawing the animals. So how do you have any expectation for the audience?
I don't. So this is a leap of faith, I guess. So if I'm getting better at trusting myself there. So when I have you talked about the room where there's just animals on the wall, paintings of animals. So
Yes.
my hope is that people connect. Like, they are paintings of animals, they're nothing else. But if you start looking at it, you feel something, you see something. And I did observe that certain people felt connected to certain animals. So there was something going on. And but in the context of exhibitions, it also works, I think, to kind of make strange arrangements. So there was a whole room just with animal paintings, and then there was a room with something totally different, and then there was a room again with something different. So you start thinking, because the whole context of the show had a very strange, so it wasn't a strange kind of rhythm or presentation, that you might, I hope, start thinking, okay, why is there just all these animals here? And you start thinking, why is this room like this and this room like this? And you start kind of stringing it together yourself. That's my hope. And obviously my talking about it, I try to talk about it in an enlightening way, but this is obviously my perspective, and I don't know if it succeeds. So it's a leap of faith. Yes, and yeah, creating a context for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Please, next question, please. Any other questions? Just gonna perhaps to pick up on from Siam. The way we show our work, and we're exhibiting our work, and I think that is a thought process our students will have to go through as well, is you need to take a leap of faith, but also as artists, you know, I always say we should not try to tell stories, but we kind of create metaphors for things. And I think Markus is a master at it, and I think we also have to, I think, trust in our audience that they are curious and investigative, and that they perhaps also, we also have to accept that they come out of an exhibition perhaps with a completely different opinion about it as the artist intended. And I think the work has to have that sort of openness. What's your position there, Markus?
Yeah, to be honest, it's the question of control, and how much control do I want as an artist and have. And I must say that when I was younger and started out, I wanted to have a lot of, I think when I really started out, I just didn't think about control or anything. I just made work, and I didn't think and didn't reflect about it, and I just made stuff. And then and just put it out there and just say, all right, they like it, ooh, cool. And then I started thinking about it, and I wanted control. And when I talk about the work, I have a lot of control over it, it seems, like presenting it. But actually, the longer I work, I want less and less control, really. And it's just an illusion that we have control over the work as an artist, I find. So there's a certain amounts, and as you said, to keep it quite open. Because in the end, the work is just the work, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just what it is. And that, to let that breathe, like let this free, the work be what the work is, and not put any meaning on it, I think then a work really succeeds. So you basically you stand in front of it and you don't ask yourself, oh, what does this mean? But you just see it, whatever it is. And that's when something really works. So me talking about it, I'm quite a good talker about the work, and it often is my motivation I express, less what it really is. And I think when I give a talk about the work, you have to see it from that perspective. It's my kind of aims. And it's tricky with my work sometimes because I do use text. And text frames work, and it is a process where I kind of get control. But the text often is, it just shows that there is no control, that things are actually totally different than we think they are. So in a way, it opens up, it opens up the work again. So, but it's an interesting question, yes. But now I feel more, the less, the best the work is, the best work just is what it is, and it just doesn't want to. Yeah, we don't ask ourselves any questions about meaning.
I do hope everyone thinks like you, because I feel like the last year when I do the honors projects, I just fresh graduated last year, and then like
Yes.
the teacher and then people, they actually wanted to know very clearly what are you talking about. And then I think for the young artists, for the students who still struggling which kind of media they're using, it's quite hard for us to already say, okay, I'm doing this, I'm just gonna focus doing on that topic. But from me, I'm still really fresh and wanted to explore more, but it's kind of super hard to me to find what exactly my work is about. It's finding the process of when you're doing the work and you find yourself, right? And I think
I think it's it's an ongoing process. It's something, as an artist, you never leave and you never get there. It's something you always do. You find, but what I said when I said I talked about motivation. So my motivation and what I want with the work is quite important, but at the same time, it's quite important to let go of that and just look at the work. So this is the process of making, I guess. So you kind of see, you make something and then you look at it and you try to assess, what is this actually? Is this really what I wanted, or is it something else? Or maybe it's better. So you have to kind of, it's really important to kind of let go of that and follow that. I think as I said, it's a process you will never leave. The work tries to brings up certain kind of questions often. And when people ask you about what did you want with the work, then maybe the work is not 100% there yet. So there's the thing. It is good. I mean, I don't think much work is really there yet, but there is some work out there, artwork, where you just stand in front of it and you just think, ooh, yeah, there's no words left, but you just look at it or you just feel it somehow. So that, I mean, that's very, very aspirational, but that's something we can aspire to. And I think as artists, we should aspire to try this. And yeah. Sorry, I did cut you off. You wanted to say something else.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I open it again to the floor? Any further question? Please take this chance to discuss it with Markus.
Can I ask one more question?
Antonia, please go ahead.
Because I don't really understand the topic of this talk. You said that the things are there because they are not there, but why is it not the things are there because they were not there? I'm not so sure of the meaning of the sentence.
So it's the meaning is, if you think about how something gets a shape or becomes gets a presence, and for example, a shadow. If you look at a shadow, really what a shadow is, it's basically a place where light doesn't, where less light arrives. So it creates its shape through that something is absent. Light in this instance. So something is not there, and that's why it becomes, we start being able to see it or perceive it or give it existence. So that's and the same with a hole. Like when you have a hole, it's a place. What is a hole? It's very weird because it's a place where something is not there. It's just an absence. But because of how we perceive the world and how we create words, symbols, meaning, we give it a shape by just giving it a word. Just naming it creates a shape and an image for it. So it has a presence, it has an existence, even though it materially is actually an absence. So there is this paradox. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand it now. Thank you.
Yeah, you do. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we could actually also figure out the title finally for our students. Yeah. We are 1.5 hours in. If there are no further questions, I would like to wrap this up. Any further questions, please do so now. Just talk into your microphone. I'm glad that we had 80 participants. I think this is probably still a record number for CCL talks. Unfortunately, we can't have a raving applause for Markus Vater. I'm absolutely delighted that you agreed to this talk. I hope it was inspiring for our students and members of the faculty. This talk was recorded, so if students want to revisit it, or also Markus has a great website which you can sort of revisit. Details I think have been sent out as well. But I want to leave the last word with Markus, perhaps with any advice for young and aspiring artists in a very difficult situation that is Hong Kong. Yeah, I leave you with a final word.
Oh, that's yeah. Sorry, I didn't expect this, but I don't know Hong Kong, but I know being a young artist, or I remember being a young artist. Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's important not to rely on the institutions, but to take things in your own hand and find the spaces and the places you want to work. Because in the end, it's not about schools or exams, or it's really about art, and art is about not what happens in these places, but it's really what happens in the world. And it's important to remember that and keep your eyes open and find the things you're dealing with in your art in that place, and not necessarily in the social context of a school or an institution. I find that's the most important, for me, the most important thing. And yeah, so I always saw art as a way of occupying. I mean, the paintings, just a very brief, painting for me was always a way of occupying a space and making it my own, and conveying ideas of my generation, really. So I hope you can find the strength and the space and the inspiration and the possibilities like we did. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Markus Vater. Congratulations, and yeah, we'll speak soon. Thank you for staying with us, and I hope perhaps we can continue this at some other point. Thank you very much. I will end the meeting now. Yeah?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Markus.